What I'm going to talk about was 81 years ago, so I hope I got it right. But I was inducted into the Marine Corps in 1943. That's about 81 years. I went through the usual stuff, everybody does. Wound up in boot camp in South Carolina. But somewhere in there they gave a questionnaire or a test. And they found out that I was able to do the Morse code. I didn't know it then, but they said, we need you in the aircraft part of our operation. So they sent me to a school and I learned the Morse code. I couldn't figure out why we were going to do that, but after reading about it recently, I know that on aircraft carriers, they have a transmitter that sends out Morse code. And when the dive bombers came back, this guided them into a safe landing. I don't know anybody that had it that way, but I wasn't on a carrier, so maybe that's the way they did it. Okay, I got a sheet here so I can remember where the heck I am. I guess the first place I went was Bogue Field, North Carolina. And it was a little airstrip just on the coast. And they had a squadron of Dauntless dive bombers. And that's a two-seat plane with one engine, and it also had the lower wing. I'm sure all of you have seen it or heard about it, the Dauntless. And if you look up, that is a Douglas dive bomber. They have, and I thought they were red. Yeah, the red ones with the holes in them, those are the diving flaps. And they open them to slow the plane down so they can be more accurate in dropping a bomb. And if you can see, the Japanese ship there has a red target. That's their rising sun. And they didn't know, but that's what the dive bomber was aiming at. And he was able to. They sank 4 Japanese ships in the Midway battle. So I guess it works. Okay, while I was in North Carolina, I had never been in an airplane, either just flying or going from city to city. I didn't know anything about airplanes, but I was now repairing equipment for a dive bomber. And it was a small airstrip, but we had guys in there working. I wasn't alone, there was another 10 or 12 guys, but this one day I was in the shop and I noticed a lot of the guys were leaving. So I was looking around to see why they were leaving the shop. With 10 or 12 guys, you know. They're working on something. I didn't have a reason to leave, but I had only been there about a week. I didn't know the custom. I went to the door looking for somebody, and there stood the colonel. He was in charge of the airstrip, and it was his day to fly. They didn't want to fly with him, so they just disappeared. The colonel said, you're going to fly with me. He said, we're going to take off in 5 minutes. Now, I had never been in an airplane. I don't have the engine running. And we go outside, there it is. His engine was running. And they don't start on batteries. They have a thing you crank on the side. And when it gets up to the right speed, then the pilot kicks it in and the engine takes off. So all this was going on. I didn't know about it, but I got in the back seat, and at least I knew how to hear the intercom. But anyway, the colonel didn't talk much. In fact, not at all. Until we took off, went about 12,000 feet up in the air, and he said something to me, and I couldn't hear it because the noises, I wasn't used to it. So pretty soon, after he made his utterance, the plane is going along like this. We just take off like that and start straight down. We're going down at about a 70-degree angle, just over some farmland down there. And about halfway down, I realized, well, it's just like flying straight out. It's just, you know, you can't really feel it, except at the beginning. That's where my stomach was. So at any rate, we pulled out and drove around a little bit, and then came back, landed. And as we're getting out, I said, "Colonel, what did you say to me up there?" And he said, "I told you to tell me if those diving flaps collapsed." And so that's what he said. He walked off, and I went back to the shop. That was my first flight. That's the only dive I ever made, but I have had more flights in them. And I thought it was a great plane. A radial engine, air-cooled. It never lost. If it was in combat, it wouldn't be taken out. Like we were also, when I was overseas, we had Mustangs in the group too. Mustang was a inline engine, and if you have an inline engine and something hits your lines or your oil supply, that's it. You're done. The thing will heat up and just collapse. So I appreciated that engine. Let's see. We were there at Boat Field for about a couple weeks, and then we got on a train. A train was the way that people traveled. There were some buses, but mostly trains. It took 5 days to go to California. I was in New Jersey. So we made our trip. It was all troops, full of Marines, and we got to the middle of Texas and the train stopped. That's unusual when you're riding in the train. I've never had stop before, and it was all prairie, nothing there. The conductor said, "You can get out and stretch now if you want." Okay, so we stretched, got back in the train, and finished our trip. We wound up in Camp Miramar in California. I got a sheet here. 81 years ago, it's hard to remember. Oh yeah, it was. We had a barracks in San Diego, Miramar, but San Diego was where we went on living, and that was great. We had a big dance hall in downtown San Diego. It's not there now, but they bring the big bands in, and it was really enjoyable. But we were there for about a week, and Thanksgiving morning, I think it was 1944, we got waked up at 6:30 and they said, "You're going to board ship, grab your stuff." And so we got on this ship. It was a Coast Guard 600-foot troop ship. And it was run by the Navy, but at any rate, we got on that thing, and we started across the Pacific. About the first night, the weather was pretty rough, but it was Thanksgiving Day, so we had a lot of turkey, and I didn't get sick. I just ate more turkey. We went all the way across to New Caledonia, Admiralty Islands, Solomon Islands. These were all places that had been captured from the Japanese, and we had camps there. They were trying to figure out when and where they were going to use us. And eventually we wound up on Luzon in the Philippines. And the troops were there trying to take they were trying to take back Manila. Manila was occupied, and the Army was trying to take it back, and our dive bombers were used to drop on the enemy lines. And that worked out pretty good, but more recently, I read about what they called the Manila Massacre. And we didn't know anything about that. In fact, we didn't know the war was over until maybe a couple months later. So at any rate, the massacre was like 400,000, 500,000 people were just shot by the Japanese behind lines in the city. They'd shoot at anything they could shoot at. Their leader was executed about 2 or 3 years later after a trial. So that was that, but we didn't know that then. Okay, the other thing I wanted to talk about was what we actually did. We had a squadron of maybe 25 planes, all Dauntless dive bombers, and these planes would take off. They could go about maybe 200 miles at the most, and then come back again. And they were they helped win the war just by overwhelming the Japanese fleet, and sunk about 4 of the Japanese airplanes. So that was a plus and helped us get along okay. One of the things that happened was we went down to southern Philippines, and that was another airstrip called Malabang. There is a town now named just north of Zamboanga. We were at the lower place for maybe a couple months, and then we went to Zamboanga, got on an LST, which we're going to hear about, I understand. At any rate, we were all set to take off, and one of our guys saw this Jeep. It was an empty Jeep, and the doors were still open. He hopped in that Jeep, started it up, ran it down and into the LST before the doors closed. then they closed them right away. Now these MPs are up there, they're looking for but we had a Jeep now. We had some, but we had an extra one. Okay. The LSC took off, and we ran right into a typhoon. I'll show you how that worked. We had a fleet of 4 LSTs, and the waves, when we got into the thing, were about 40 feet high. When you were at the bottom, all you saw was water. Now, with an LST, you're not underground or under the deck. You're on the deck. There wasn't that much room for a couple hundred guys, but they did take us down when it got real bad, and we could stand up around, but there was no place to lie down. So myself and a couple other guys found that we went into the tank deck and we slept on some of the boxes and things they had there. So that's how we got around that. But I'm about done with my story, and I'm going to give room. You might hear about an LSD here, I don't know. But at any rate, it was a happy ending. We actually went over to China, went by Honolulu. I was the most disappointed person. I never got to go off the ship at Honolulu. We sat there and looked at the palm trees. And we went home. But that's just part of it. I keep hearing, my brain says, oh yeah, tell them about this, but we don't have enough time.
Thank you, John.
Okay, that's it.